Hey yo, everyone! In September 2024, something real weird happened. Now, I'm not talking about Otani becoming the first 50-50 player in MLB history or P. Diddy getting chopped for being a creep. I'm talking about how an entire publishing company all walked out at once. That's right, in early September of last year, the entire 25-person staff of Annapurna Interactive collectively quit on the spot. An internal feud of ownership, direction, and transparency led to the breakup of one of recent gaming's most beloved publishers. Today, let's talk about this crazy story, how and why it happened, and what the heck is going on with Annapurna Interactive today. As always, if you enjoy the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Alright, let's get it. Alrighty, so let's start with Annapurna Interactive itself. In 2016, Megan Ellison, a billionaire film producer behind Annapurna Pictures, started up a gaming subdivision aptly named Annapurna Interactive. Annapurna Interactive was to help diversify Ellison's media empire by capitalizing on the ever-growing market of video games. At the time, Annapurna Pictures, the film and TV division, was going through some very public financial struggles, so the gaming division needed to succeed ASAP. As a result, Ellison brought on some industry vets to lead the publishing company. Nathan Gary, Deborah Mars, and Hector Sanchez, all of whom previously worked for Sony. Hector Sanchez eventually left the company in 2019, but he did do a lot of work to help get the publisher up and running. After establishing her cabinet, Ellison just kinda disappeared. She was very hands-off, so that left Annapurna Interactive to their own devices, which was completely fine by them. And hey, it worked out great. The publisher was able to find some incredible indie studios and help them flourish with their games. What Remains of Edith Finch, Outer Wilds, Journey, Stray, and a bunch more. They were so successful that Annapurna even formed their own internal development studio that was signed on to produce a brand new Blade Runner game. So really quick, before we go any further, let's distinguish the difference between a game development studio and a publisher, because sometimes the definition can get kind of muddled. Up to this point, Annapurna Interactive was solely a game publisher. They haven't really produced any games themselves, so even though they get credited for games such as The Outer Wilds and Stray, they didn't actually create them. That would be Mobius Digital and Blue 12 Studio, respectively. Instead, Annapurna did the more corporate things, the things a publisher is normally brought on for: funding, development tools, porting, quality assurance, marketing, etc. Basically, the game studio will do the actual development of the game, and the publisher will give them the tools they need to create it and then market it with their bigger budget. This is a pretty common way for an indie studio to make a big splash or break into the industry. For example, From Software has published with Bandai Namco, Activision, and even Nintendo. Because of that, they've had a much larger reach than they probably would have if they just self-published. Now that they're some big dogs themselves, they might choose to forego partnering with a publisher in the future, but for up-and-coming studios, a publisher really is the way to go if you can't afford to market and develop your game completely on your own. Anyway, sorry about that tangent. With Annapurna Interactive going on a roll and dishing out banger after banger, Ellison decided to come out of hiding and rejoin the company with a more hands-on approach around 2021. Her first act of business was appointing Nathan Gary, one of the veteran leaders of Annapurna Interactive that we talked about earlier, to president of all of Annapurna. Basically, he was put in charge of the film, TV, and gaming divisions. According to some anonymous reporting from IGN, even though Gary was in charge of all of Annapurna, he still remained focused on the gaming division. Apparently, he ushered out some TV and film executives and even rerouted money and other resources to realign the company with a more gaming-centric philosophy. The Interactive team believed that they deserved more funding since they were bringing in more revenue. Now, Annapurna did create a new animation division during Gary's tenure and found great success, but leaks suggest that Ellison was actually the one who started that and Gary just kind of was there for it. So now there are two factions forming within the company: the gaming sector and the film TV sector. And this is where things start to get interesting. According to IGN, which wrote this wonderful in-depth report that I'll link below, at the start of 2024, Ellison decided to take back control of Annapurna with a more hands-on approach. This is notable because during all of this, Ellison was getting thrown some pretty nasty accusations her way. Anonymous sources have said that she's had a history of building toxic workplaces. Allegedly, she has a tendency to overreach, that she was hard to get a hold of for important decisions, that she would get kind of toxic when it came to creative differences, and that there was a track record of her going back on promises that she had made to the publishing team. So obviously, there was a bit of a ruckus when she decided to sink her claws back into the company. Anyway, this was done so she could supposedly balance the film and TV and video game divisions more evenly. As a result, Gary was demoted back to head of Annapurna Interactive only. Or at least that's what was supposed to happen. There are varying reports on what actually went down, but at this time, Gary ended up leaving the company completely. Ellison says he resigned on his own accord because of the demotion, but other sources say that she fired him before taking his role as president of the company. All of this confusion and the abruptness of it all led to a lot of the publishing team feeling betrayed and oblivious, and a group of employees even quit in protest. Things were really starting to go off the rails now, so Ellison held an emergency meeting to figure out how her employees were feeling and if there was any way for her to right the ship. As it turns out, there was. Bring back Gary and all the other staff members who just walked out. So, to her credit, Ellison swallowed her pride and did just that. Within a few days, everyone was back at Annapurna. Obviously, tensions were a bit high now, so to remedy this, Gary and Ellison began discussing a potential spin-off for Annapurna Interactive. Essentially, Gary would lead the gaming division and Ellison would head the film TV side of things. Annapurna Interactive would deviate from the parent company and become Verset, their own separate publishing company, which would be owned 50-50 between Annapurna and Verset itself. The deal would be that Verset would operate all the video game stuff and split its revenue with Annapurna, which Ellison surprisingly seemed on board with. However, as the days turned to weeks and the weeks turned to months, employees at the publishing company began to grow skeptical of the split actually happening. Do you guys remember Hector Sanchez? We mentioned him briefly in the beginning. He was one of the original vets to start up the company before leaving in 2019 for other opportunities. Well, he was secretly brought back to Annapurna by Ellison and began working on some gaming projects without the rest of Annapurna Interactive being notified. It wasn't until August of 2024 that Sanchez's return was made public when he suddenly was appointed the role of President of Interactive and New Media, a brand new role that sounded a lot like the position that Gary currently held. The story goes that Sanchez was working with Remedy Entertainment, the legends behind hit games like Control and Alan Wake, on a deal that would give him the rights to any film and TV adaptations. When Ellison caught word of this, she reached out to Sanchez and offered him a role back at the company, bringing those Remedy Entertainment contracts along with him. Supposedly, Sanchez would be in charge of any AAA and AA games and any TV or film adaptations of those IPs. Meanwhile, Gary and Verset, or Annapurna Interactive, would remain in the indie space. Jump ahead a few months and yep, Annapurna signs a deal with Remedy for their film and TV rights and agreed to help fund Control 2, which I am unbelievably hyped for. So all of this is going on in the background while Gary and the Verset team are working on their own projects with the belief that they're still going to end up splitting with Annapurna 50-50. Then all of a sudden the Remedy news breaks, and this is the first time the publishing crew hears about any of it. This whole time they were left in the dark while Ellison and Sanchez were negotiating with Remedy. This led to the team blowing up with shock, confusion, frustration, and just plain old uncertainty of what their future was with Annapurna. Turns out, those feelings were well warranted because in August of 2024, right when Sanchez was publicly brought back to the company, Annapurna officially canceled their spin-off discussions with Verset. They claim that Gary and the publishing team never responded to their legal contracts that they sent out. Meanwhile, Gary and the Interactive crew say that Ellison refused to meet them in person for any negotiating. Looking back in hindsight, this slow takeover was right there in the open for everyone to see. Sources told IGN that over the months leading up to the Remedy news, Ellison became more and more hands-on with everything Annapurna Interactive, almost to the point where the publishing team didn't even know what their future was or what the direction of the company was anymore. The tension and frustration had met its breaking point, and as a result, Gary and every single other employee of Annapurna Interactive signed a joint resignation letter. 2 weeks later, on September 6, 2024, the entire staff of Annapurna Interactive walked out, leaving behind only Ellison, Sanchez, and a brand new CFO who was literally just hired. The sad part is, the publishing crew wanted to stay with Annapurna. IGN reports that employees tried to work with Ellison on some sort of agreement on how to move forward, but she declined any sort of negotiations. This blatant lack of transparency wasn't just towards the publishing crew either. Apparently, all of Annapurna's publishing partners didn't even know about this mass quitting until it was just about to happen. Annapurna says they didn't have enough time to inform their developer partners, despite having a literal 2-week notice handed to them by the publishing team. Which brings us to today. What a freaking mess, am I right? The former Interactive team has fully left the company and might be forming a publishing group of their own, but that is yet to come to fruition. As for Annapurna, they're scrambling to honor all of their previous agreements with developers. Apparently, Sanchez has promised that all previously signed contracts will be fulfilled and that they are aggressively backfilling their open positions. As far as I can tell, the internal Blade Runner game is still in development, but its original director and the rest of the development team also resigned with the rest of the publishing staff last September. According to an Annapurna spokesperson, the company is focused on moving forward. They sent out this pretty lame presser and ended it with what I think was supposed to be some sort of sly comment. P.S. We're hiring. Not gonna lie, that sounds pretty tone deaf to me after they just torpedoed their entire staff into oblivion. The company is gonna have a lot of work to do if they want to fulfill their obligations to the dozens and dozens of projects they have contracts with, especially since they're rebuilding their staff from the ground up. Meanwhile, I think one of the biggest takeaways from this whole thing is how strong the Annapurna Interactive staff was in their conviction. Rebecca Valentine, who wrote the IGN article that I linked below, wrote this conclusion that I think just absolutely hits the nail on the head. Annapurna has splintered into 2 groups, both of which are now working to pick up the pieces. The remains of Annapurna Interactive, or perhaps a future Verset, consist of 25 individuals who felt strongly enough about perceived mismanagement, poor communication, apparent spontaneous layoffs of leaders and one another that they were willing to give up paychecks and stability at a time of overwhelming industry job and funding uncertainty. Honestly, major respect to those guys. And major shout out to Valentine. This was a fantastic article. But anyway, I want to hear from you guys. What did you think of this crazy story? Did you know that the entire Annapurna Interactive staff all quit at once? Do you think they can completely fulfill all of their promises to their devs? I want to know what you guys think about all of this gaming drama. It's not super important in terms of gaming as a whole, but I thought that it was a fascinating story and wanted to share it with all of you. Hopefully I didn't get any of the timeline or nitty-gritty details wrong. I think I did alright. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It, of course, means a lot. I appreciate you guys as always, and I'll catch you in the next one.